hello there. Welcome to 60 Minutes with me, Angela Ajetumobi. It was a Tuesday, May the 14th, 2013. The federal government of Nigeria declared a state of emergency in 3 northeastern states, Borno, Yobe, and Adamawa. The president relied on Section 305, subsection 1 of the 1999 Constitution as amended. Now, a lot of questions have been raised about this declaration of emergency because for the first time, the federal government has retained the elected governors of those states. Now, today I'll be speaking with the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission because the commission has opted to conduct an independent investigation into some of that insurgency that we see in the northeast of Nigeria. So join me after the break. Professor Chidi Odinkalu is spending 60 minutes with me today. Together we'll be looking at the insurgency in the northeast and whether or not the federal government was right in declaring a state of emergency in 3 states. Welcome back. Welcome, Professor Odinkalu. Thank you for coming back on 60 Minutes with me.
Thank you very much, Angel, for having me.
Right. Now, I've been wanting to speak with you for a while. Issues like Bama in Borno State, where we have insurgency, the Boko Haram, all that terrorism going on there. And of course, the federal government's reaction. Some people tend to focus on the rights, the human rights of those we like to refer to as victims of collateral damage. Should that be a consideration, first of all, for any government wanting to go into counter terrorism?
It's a difficult time for all involved in this, I think on all sides.
Yes.
There are Nigerians who are caught in between this. They're caught in between the federal forces or the security agencies, and they're caught in between the forces, the insurgent forces. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think it's important to spare a lot of thought for them. There are political leaders in the country who've got to deal directly with decisions, knowing that whatever they do, human life will be lost.
Yes.
And it's important to spare thought for them. I'd like to believe that people don't go into public office with a design to wield the offices of state to kill people.
Yes.
Some people will say I'm naive, but that is what I honestly believe. So I also spare a thought for them. I spare a thought, for instance, for the governor of Borno State, who has got this whole thing on his hands. Yes. and is in an impossible situation. Mine is in many ways the least of the difficult circumstances here. But I don't think we should forget that a president, I've never been one and I'm not likely ever to be one, but I suspect that presidents, the choices that confront presidents are not choices between good and bad.
Yes.
Because if those were the choices, we would not be in the business of running a country. The choices that confront presidents quite often are between catastrophe and cataclysm. And whatever he or she chooses, trying to persuade his or her people that is the best and rally them behind those choices.
Yes.
And at the end of the day, the president, whether you don't have to agree with the president or disagree, but the president, at any point in time, takes an oath that is important to defend the country and its territory.
Yes.
I'm not privy to his decision making, and therefore I don't have the parameters on the basis of which to assess it. But what I do know is that it is important in times of national difficulty to support in a critical manner the decisions of those who have to protect the country, and also to recognize that the life of every Nigerian is important, in or out of uniform, in Borno, Bama, Akwa Ibom, or Calabar, that we all have a responsibility to protect human life. And therefore, I'm not comfortable with the expression collateral damage. No Nigerian should be collateral damage, and no human being should be collateral damage. So while taking steps in an emergency, we should also, and I think the President's broadcast was very clear on this.
Yes.
I mean, it was not gratuitous that he inserted rules of engagement.
Yes.
And he inserted constraints on what could and could not be done. And I do think that was a clear message and a clear roadmap that all agencies involved should do something about ensuring that Nigerians don't end up as statistics in collateral damage.
Yes. Okay. Now let's look at the source from which the president, derived the powers to declare an emergency. In his speech, he spoke about Section 305, subsection 1. And that gives certain circumstances under which a state of emergency can be declared. But some other legal practitioners are saying he didn't even need to go through Section 305 by virtue of his oath of office, and which is sworn to protect the sovereignty, the integrity of the Federal Republic. He could go under that, a kind of doctrine of necessity, which we've seen used in the United States as well.
The executive has got a lot of instruments, particularly at the federal level, under its within its purview in these situations. The fact of the matter, though, is that when you exercise political authority at the executive level, you want to preserve your options, and you want to be able to deploy a toolkit of policy instruments or operational instruments that you want to have at your disposal, a toolkit that offers you flexibility. Now, it is indeed true that a president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The presidency itself is different, is a lot of jobs in one. The president is commander-in-chief of the armed forces. The president is the chief of state, is embodiment of the Nigerian state, and the president is the head of government, amongst many other things.
Yes.
And these are three different jobs coalesced in one entity. Now, it is possible to deploy different instruments, but the oath of office does not give you the full panoply of instruments that you need to be able to use.
Yes.
And a formal proclamation of an emergency offers a flexibility of instrumentation in the policy instrumentation and operationalization that I think is critical. It also offers circumscribes a framework of legality to it, because there are constraints on a state of emergency. When you are deploying troops within your country under executive powers, you want political backup, because the people affected come from somewhere and have representation, and there is political price to pay. It's easy for people to sit down and lawyer this stuff, to no end. But this is not the stuff of academic dissertations. And the presidents I know who have had to send troops into their countries against their own people say a lot of prayers before they do it. Because they know that your own people are going to get killed. And you don't run for elections to kill your people. I'm sorry. So I like to ask the lawyers to restrain. It's good. I think it's healthy to have
all this comment.
The commentary. I think it hopefully educates people about different parts of the Constitution. But I think it's also important to situate this in the context of our shared humanity, of our shared citizenship, and the difficulties that we confront.
And the difficulties that we confront. Now, which should come first? Should he have declared that state of emergency before going to the National Assembly, perhaps?
When you look at the Constitution, it prescribes a time limit within which the president would send the formal instruments to the National Assembly for a vote, which formally proclaims an emergency. So, really, there are several steps. Don't forget, really, we have had the JTF in much of northeastern Nigeria
Yes.
for since 2009. I mean, the first deployments were done under President Yar'Adua, really. And so, given that, the situation is not entirely new, but the governance of the situation needs to change. A state of emergency is not a charter for anything goes. No. And sending it to the National Assembly is the last stage in a process.
Yes.
You know, a chief of state needs to be able to take the official political decision. It needs to go through the legal instrumentation. He will need to communicate the instructions to the military chiefs,
Yes.
who in turn need to be able to mobilize their people. Now, you cannot wait until the political processes are in place. In fact, as I said, there is a timeline
Yes.
under the Constitution within which the Senate, the National Assembly must ratify. And within that timeline, you have to do preparations, you have to get people in place. And you've also got to do the technical things that you need to do.
Yes.
You need to have a concept of operations. You need to have rules of engagement design. You need to have those communicated to the troops. Now, I'm not necessarily saying, I don't know whether or not these have in fact happened. That's part of the process of investigation that we're undertaking so that we can understand exactly what is going on. But there are lots of preparatory things that need to take place.
Okay, so we should all support the president in this, but what is a state of emergency hoping to achieve? What does it achieve beyond, you know, putting a curfew in place, for instance, and preventing people from moving around? How does that quicken the solution to the situation we have?
No, I want to be clear. I think it is important that we should not give up on the responsibilities of citizenship. I don't believe in uncritical support. And the only people who will criticize you are those who care about you.
Yes.
And those who hail everything you do and tell you that you're the best thing in humanity since sliced bread don't like you. And I do think that we need to support our country. We all deserve a country in which we can all disagree or agree,
Yes.
or work towards development, or do politics, or practice our vocation, or indeed have interviews like this.
Yes.
But if we don't have a country to begin with, those things can't happen.
Yes.
So the first, and if a president acts to defend the country and to preserve the country, I don't care what the issues are, I will support that president for that purpose.
Yes.
Now, it is also important in doing that to be able to make sure that the patriotism of the president in doing that
Yes.
is not undermined by the enthusiasms of operational people. So it's important to keep vigilant and to keep critical. And that, I think, is my view of the situation we've got. And
Yes.
to be fair,
Yes.
I did meet the president
Yes.
to indicate to him
Yes.
that the commission would be interested in investigating independently
Yes.
this situation. First, he saw me at no notice. Secondly, he made it clear that, and I don't think I am letting out any state secret when I say this, but he made it clear he would not, it is not his style or in his interest to interfere with the work of independent institutions.
Such as yours.
Such as the commission.
Yes.
And to his credit, he instructed the defense, the security agencies to support
Yes.
the commission and to cooperate with the commission
Yes.
in that work. And you can't ask for more.
Mm.
There was something he said, we must always respect the human rights of our people. Now, that message has not come, has to come out as clearly as possible in this, that the life of every Nigerian matters to all of us, to the political leadership, to the citizens, to the neighbors, to everybody. That has to be the central message in this. And around that, every other thing can follow. So that when you do an emergency,
Yeah.
or when you communicate it, you say, I am doing this, or this has been done to defend our people and our country. Now, it's easier to rally people when, and I thought the broadcast actually was masterful.
Well
now,
put together.
I do think it is important that those who serve our country can rise to the vision of that broadcast and make it work.
And make it work. All right. We'll take our first break now. When we come back, we'll continue from there. Join us again after the break.
I want to present myself as an African.
And I know, and I know, and I know, and I know. I know what you like. I know, and I know, and I know. I know what you like. Everything you love, baby, you like. Baby, you love, baby, you love. And I know, 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 and I know. Baby, you like, baby, you like, baby, you like, baby, you like.
Back. If you've just joined us, you're watching 60 Minutes with me, Angela Jitumobi, and on the hot seat today, the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission, Chidi Odinkalu. Now, Prof, April 2013 in Bama, Borno State, they're saying about 185 people dead. I mean, depending on which news reports you're reading, the commission is, well, you've said the commission is planning an independent investigation, but some papers report that you've been giving the presidential nod. What does that mean?
Well, I just explained to you what
Yes.
transpired.
It's not going to be, it's not, the president is not going to adopt your report.
No, the president has no obligation to adopt our report.
Okay.
We also have a statutory responsibility not to adopt anybody's positions. Which is what independent is about.
Yes.
But you see, there's also coexistence in the public sector, and much of the territory that we're dealing with is, in any case, under military. Is under the at the moment, in much of the territory that we're dealing with, the security agencies are undertaking active operations.
Yeah.
The security agencies are under the responsibility of the president. And it is easier to get cooperation from them if they get instructions from their commander-in-chief. And so it is proper, therefore, that we let the president know, as commander-in-chief, that this is what we contemplate. I will take him into full confidence. And that's exactly what we've done.
Now, what will be the terms of reference? What will your commission be hoping to get with an investigation that the security agencies can't get?
It's not necessarily whether or not the security agencies can get it, but building a country requires credible institutions, independent institutions. You see, if you're accusing the security agencies of having done something,
Yes.
It's not fair on the security agencies to ask the security agencies to have a monopoly of the story. Because if they do, nobody will believe them. People will believe that they are self-interested.
Yes.
It's not, the politicians cannot be trusted to do it because people think the politicians are always selling a lie.
Yes.
Now, you've therefore got to have institutions that actually are credible enough and where people are committed enough to facts and nothing more to be able to undertake that. And I like to tell young people who, I mentor or work with, don't tell me what you think I want to hear. Just tell me what I need to know. And that's exactly the same thing I like to tell politicians who are my friend. Don't encourage these people who come around and tell you what you want to hear, tell you that, there's been no better thing than you since God created humanity. Because the day you're out of here, your successor is going to hear the same thing. Get people who tell you what you need to know in order to be the best leader you can be. That is the role of the commission, to be able to tell our political leaders some things that they may need to know, which they may not want to hear. It's not a role anybody should relish, but it's a responsibility we must take seriously if we're going to get a better country.
Now, but the federal government has replied, the Washington Post newspaper in America, its editorial on Nigeria. The editorial was titled Tactics Under Fire, talking about the recent confrontation between Boko Haram and the federal government forces in Baga. And he said, I'm quoting him, our government is taking resolute actions to ensure that a thorough investigation and accountability are accomplished swiftly and effectively, end of quote. So this effort is taking place within the boundaries of Nigerian law and in accordance with the human rights principles enshrined in our constitution, end of quote. I thought, you know, reading through that statement, why only human rights enshrined in our own constitution? If we're signatory to other international bodies and international treaties on human rights, are we saying that if those rights are not included in our constitution, we're not entitled to them?
Well, you know, the beauty of democracy and the public sector is that different people have different jobs. The president has his job, the vice president has his, ministers have theirs, judges have theirs, the police and security agencies have theirs. Ambassadors have their jobs as well, and human rights commissions have theirs. And I wouldn't want to do the job of the ambassador. I'm sure that he's got a difficult enough brief. And mine, I'm trying to make mine as easy as it can be.
Okay, we'll leave that alone then. I read you the other day, you said Nigerians should stop the politicization of the Northeast crisis. A lasting solution can only be found from a broader conversation on security challenges in the Northeast and the country generally. What should this conversation entail then, in your opinion?
You know, our Constitution says in Section 14 that the safety and security of everybody in Nigeria is the primary responsibility of government and therefore of our politics. And that, for me, is the defining reason why anybody should go into public office, to enhance the protection of your people. And when that is imperiled,
Yes.
a country needs to rally together. For me, the question of public safety and security has to be above politics. You cannot politicize your police or your armed forces or your judiciary or your state security service. When you do that, every other thing, nothing else can work. That for me is not negotiable. And you can't also racialize or ethnicize the well-being of your people so that if Angela is killed,
Yes.
I think it is justifiable because she's a woman or she comes from the South or she's a Christian or a Muslim.
Yes.
And if Umaru is killed, I think, oh, that's fine. You know, he's a Muslim and he's a man and he comes from that other part of the country.
Yeah.
When you begin to do that, you are on the road to a mass atrocity site. Now, you know, there's a story I like to tell of a case that ultimately I think was decided by the Nigerian Supreme Court in 1975. You may remember it, but, you know, from our time in the law school.
Yes.
Ralph Gaji against the state. Ralph Gaji was a lawyer and a Muslim. The case originated in northern Nigeria. Ralph Gaji was charged with murder. The woman, and he was a very comfortable man. The woman that he killed was a woman from what was then East Central State,
Right.
who worked with him. And at the time, by the time the body was discovered, she was in advanced decomposition. She could hardly, it took a lot of effort to identify her. So this was a Christian Igbo woman,
Yes.
a Muslim lawyer, a Christian Igbo woman who who didn't, you know, who was could have been lost.
Yes.
Nobody could have cared about her, and for whom most people would probably not have cared because her station in life was considered low.
Yes.
And the perpetrator was, the accused person was a very senior, comfortable lawyer the accused was Muslim, the victim was Christian.
Yes.
Now, two men prosecuted the case. Muhammad Nasir, who later became the president of the Court of Appeal and
Yes.
is now a traditional ruler,
Yes.
and Mohammed Bello, who later became the Chief Justice of Nigeria. Both were who? Muslims. Now, in today's Nigeria, the case of Ralph Gaji would never have come to court. Nobody would have cared about this woman. When the body was discovered, it would probably have been allowed to rot, or would have been disposed of by the environmental sanitation fellows.
Yes.
There would have been no investigation. And if people had found out, it would have been, well, she's a Muslim, or she's a Christian, who cares?
Yes.
And why do I recall this story? Because we were not always like this. Now, an IED, an improvised explosive device, goes off, people are killed, and we're picking a fight over whether the people who died were Christian or Muslim, or whether more northerners than southerners died.
Yeah.
And that is painful, because we're all children of one God. And the children from Lagos or Owerri, whose parents are killed in this situation, will be as pained as the children of parents from Bama or Biu, whose parents are killed in this situation. The children of policemen or soldiers or SSS officers beheaded in Nasarawa State will feel just as much pain as I would, or my children would, if I were the person beheaded or killed. And I do think that we've got to a stage of politicization and racialization and ethnicization that, in the days of, my days of reggae music, we talked about ism and schism.
Yes.
Now, we have reduced our crisis of humanity to a crisis of ism and schism, and we need to pull back.
We need to pull back. But the thing is, Prof, these things you've counted, ethnicization, politicization, these are the things that people use now, to do well, as we like to say in these parts. He's doing well. Once you latch on to that, you're guaranteed a platform from which you can do well.
Which is why people like you and me have to say, no, you cannot do well on the blood of Nigerians and blood of people who come to Nigeria and the safety and security of our people and people who come here to do business.
Yes.
It's not on. And we've got to denounce that with everything that we can muster. You cannot overcome a common enemy by dividing yourselves along these lines of politics, of sect, of gender, of race, of ethnicity, of state of origin. No, you've got to rally together and recognize that the bomb that goes off anywhere in Nigeria could take out anybody. And these things don't know you according to your gender or your race. There is no bomb that says, okay, you know what, we will avoid all Christians and kill only Muslims. Or this is the bomb for Muslims and it will not kill Christians. Or this is a bomb for women, it doesn't kill men. They kill indiscriminately. Because they kill indiscriminately, we've got to work against them in unity.
Now, what did you mean by politicization? And I'm asking that because some people did promise to make the country ungovernable. Can we divorce that thought by some people, which they expressed, from what is going on in the Northeast?
But that's part of the politicization? Now, you don't know whether those people were mouthing off or whether they were serious or whether they were capable of doing what they were doing. And some of those people themselves have come under attack from these things. And so you don't even know what exactly is happening.
Yes.
And that is why we've also, those who wield temporal power deserve our prayers and our criticism. But, you're not just governor or president or local government chairperson of those that voted for you. You're governor or president or chairperson for everybody within the territory, including those that loathe you. And in fact, in many ways, you are even more president and more governor of those that loathe you, because you've got to ensure that they're alive to tell you the things you don't want to hear.
Yes. Do you support amnesty to Boko Haram?
that's an issue I think that requires explanation. What does amnesty mean? And I do think that it is important for political leaders to explain to Nigerians what they are talking about.
You saw the headline yesterday. One of the newspapers said the president saying, surrender your arms and accept the amnesty being offered by the federal government.
Now you've got to understand, this is again, you see, there are media shorthands. Amnesty is a media shorthand.
Yes.
But the name of the committee is actually, and the terms of reference don't have amnesty in them. Now, people have read amnesty into this, and it's a much more complicated and much more nuanced dialogue. And in a world of sound bites and clip bites, you know, people latch onto amnesty and they make it the headline. But I think it's a much more complicated policy debate. Now, do you want to exclude anything or some things from the table of options available to manage the situation? No. I do think every option has to be on the table. From what people call amnesty to a state of emergency. It's a spectrum of of the contents of a toolbox. How you use those is a different matter, and under what circumstances and in what manner and for what purposes, tactical or strategic, long-term or short-term, I think is what is at issue. So that's why I'm a bit circumspect in answering yes or no, because it requires slightly more complex digesting than that.
Okay. So you heard about the killing of 12 policemen in Azuzuama, Southern Ijaw local government area of Bayelsa State. What is the National Human Rights Commission saying about this?
I've made it quite clear. You know, I was with the Inspector General of Police on Thursday, I believe. You know, just to commiserate with him as a fellow human being. You know, in my working life, I've had twice to go and tell people whom I sent, the family of people whom I sent to work, that the person I sent to work would not come back. There is nothing that prepares you for it. It's the most harrowing thing that you can ever experience. And the security agencies generally, and the police in particular, are taking a big hit in this. Over the past month, they've lost over 200 men and women.
Altogether?
Well over that. And that's, now, in some of these situations, you can't even find the bodies, the remains, to return to the families, to encourage the family to have closure.
Because burial is closure.
Thank you. And so, you've got to also feel pain. Two of my uncles were police officers. They're now retired. And it's not fun. Whatever we may think of our police, that's the police we've got. And we've got to work to make them better. The business of exterminating law enforcement agencies is just atrocious. There is I can't find any word in the dictionary for it. It's entirely unacceptable. And if we cannot stop it, we don't stand a chance. You know, you go and decapitate police officers, they may not be saints, but none of us are.
Yes.
And those are the people that we've got to use to defend ourselves. And if we cannot even help them protect themselves, we're in trouble.
You think we're doing enough for the policemen?
No, absolutely not. And this is my mantra. You cannot give what you don't have, as we say.
Yeah.
And
so, okay, we're expecting compassion and all that from the police.
Who have never been shown compassion. We're expecting dignity from the police. We've never given them dignity. We're expecting skill and professionalism from them. We've not made the investments to get that return. And you send your average police person to a police college that is not a college. They come out and they don't have uniforms to do their work. They don't have kits. They don't have rations. Their salaries are not enough to take them home. And the stations in which they work are really subhuman, and they don't have residences or barracks or accommodation. You send them on a mission and they have to live under the elements and plunder the neighborhood in order to survive. What do you expect? And the only police officers who look half decent will be those attached to madam who are doing school run. And that does not give dignity. When you wake up, you know, and a lot of these people are professionals and, you know, they're very well educated young people. And you see an assistant superintendent of police, a deputy superintendent of police. In those days when we were in school, those are the people we aspired to be like. And today, what do? 7 a.m., they're in the vehicle taking madam's children to school. And at 2 o'clock, they're bringing the kids back. And when that is done on Saturday, they're going shopping for madam. Now, that is not the police force. And all of us have got to understand that the police, that situation endangers us all.
It endangers us all. Okay, join us again after the break.
Who knows abi better thing? Abi who no like better thing? All these fine things wey dey see so. Na money government dey take do am now. Abi, it's like, you know, I mean, excuse me, I dey pay my tax. I dey do wetin? I dey pay my tax. Say you don't pay your own tax. Have you pay your tax?
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
Welcome back. My concluding moments now on 60 Minutes with Angela and Professor Chidi Odinkalu. Now, Prof, the Senate has called for a probe. The House of Rep calls for a Judicial Commission of Inquiry. What's the difference between the two?
Well, since the Supreme Court decided the case of Babangida and Human Rights Violations Investigation Commission in 2002, it's been very clear. The Nigerian government at the federal level does not have powers to institute a Judicial Commission of Inquiry outside the Federal Capital Territory. So the only inquiry powers, in fact, that are coercive, that have substantive subpoena and all those other powers at the federal level reside at the National Human Rights Commission, under the National Human Rights Commission Act. Now, anybody can do a probe, but you require the consent and cooperation voluntarily of those whom you want to probe to do that. Now, the reason you have commissions of inquiry or inquiries with subpoena powers is so that you can discover things that people don't want to give you. And if you cannot discover those, which is the effect of Babangida and the Human Rights Violations Investigation Commission, then it's no use. If you're just relying on people to tell you what they want to tell you. So that's really the fundamental distinction.
So with the judicial one, you can subpoena people to
you
appear.
Can compel them.
Compel them. Right. So the 12 members of the board of the commission met to discuss the latest killings in Baga, Borno State. What did you decide?
I think we kept faith in Nigerians in announcing that we were undertaking an investigation. Things have evolved since then. And we're undertaking an investigation into a situation, but also undertaking a wider assessment of the situation in northeastern Nigeria. Obviously, since then, we've had the announcement of an emergency, and operations have begun ostensibly in response to the announcement. And so we're taking that on board as well. And we are reviewing the material available, talking to different sets, different people. At the moment, we are unable to get physically into Borno State or Yobe State or the states affected by the emergency. But we are taking steps to be able to deliver an interim report, and I'm reasonably confident that before the end of next month, we'll have an interim report.
Okay. And when the Human Rights Commission has this report, what value shall we place on it? What will be its effect in our daily lives?
I think that will be for Nigerians to decide. The report is going to be at the disposal of Nigerians.
To be a public document?
Absolutely. I'm expecting, we are under an obligation to provide Nigerians with feedback on what we've undertaken. We're not running a cult here. And we're not running the presidium of the Politburo of the National Human Rights Commission. So we're going to be honest with our people, but we're also going to, it's also proper that we bring it to the attention of those who are capable of doing something about it in government. So we're going to be delivering the report to those who run the country, who have responsibility for running the country: the President, the President of the Senate, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, the security agencies. We are going to be delivering those formally. And Nigerians can make their own assessments. But we want to be balanced in whatever we do. We want to be
Yes.
able to reflect all sides. The security agencies who have a difficult situation to deal with, the political authorities, the affected communities, the state government. And it is important that all of these be synthesized. And the Commission has got the obligation and indeed the luxury to be able to do that in ways that all these other entities may not have.
All right. Now, at the inauguration of the committee that is supposed to, look at amnesty for the Northeast, the president had said that all Nigerians were expecting the committee to perform magic. Do you think that that work can be done? Is it possible that a committee will be able to find a solution there?
Well, I do understand Nigerians. I would like anything to happen, to take this chalice away, in a manner of speaking. And if a committee can do it, by all means. So I think I understand the metaphor of magic in that sense. There's also a joke that a camel, the camel and its hump.
Yes.
The joke is that the camel is a horse that was invented by a committee. So, you've also got to be modest in the expectations of a committee. But they don't have a difficult task, particularly in the situation that we've got now with an emergency and associated issues.
I mean, because some people look at it this way. If the president and commander-in-chief couldn't do the magic, are we expecting ordinary civilians to get a solution?
Well, it all depends on whether or not we expect that the answer to the situation is military or not. And every one of these situations invariably ends up in a conversation, in dialogue, around the table.
Yes.
And you've got to plan, while you undertake security operations of whatever nature, you've got to plan for inevitable political dialogue. And what you don't want to do is to create a situation of memories, memories of atrocity, of crimes, of collateral damage that are so deep, they then postpone the necessary political processes that must take place.
Yes.
Which is why entities like a Human Rights Commission must exist and must continue to envision that day when it is possible for all people involved to reach those basic understandings that can make life meaningful for those who live in these communities.
Okay. Would you like to comment on the brouhaha going on between the federal government, the presidency, and the Rivers State government?
I cannot honestly say that I know the facts fully. I would imagine that the president and the Rivers State governor are talking. I know for a fact that the Rivers State governor, has had long-standing relationships, let me put it that way, with the president, and they are both senior officials of our country, and I'm sure that wise heads will prevail.
Wise heads will prevail. Okay. Now, those who offer themselves for the Amnesty Committee, the president commended them, despite not being consulted before their names were made public. Is that an indictment of those who didn't accept in spite of the names? Didn't they have the right not to want to participate, especially when they didn't know they were going to be appointed?
Public service is a matter of conscience. I cannot, I don't know what transpired. I don't know whether in fact they were consulted or not.
Yes.
One of them is a good friend, and I asked, and I was told quite seriously that he was not consulted. He told me he was not consulted.
Yes.
Now, I don't think that's proper, if that's what happened. Because also, it's not just, I think as a matter of propriety and courtesy, people should be consulted for such matters. But particularly in this case, because it affects your safety and security, it affects the safety and security of the people around you and whom you love. There may be people who object to amnesty and who may decide to do you in. There may be people who love it and who may decide to hail you.
Yes.
But I do think it is. I cannot criticize anybody at all for declining in those circumstances. I can't also criticize anybody at all for accepting in those circumstances, because fundamentally it's a matter of conscience, and everybody's got to make their own assessments and decisions.
Can we criticize the federal government's handling so far of the killings of soldiers in Baga?
Because I'm presently involved in an investigation of that, I'd rather hold my
Your
thoughts on
view
that one.
on that. Okay. Now, in 1995,
I hope my memory goes back that far.
no, the commission was established then to comply with Nigeria's international obligations as a member of the United Nations. For 6 years, our status was downgraded to a C status. The International Coordinating Committee, ICC, on Human Rights downgraded that. They said the law setting up the commission in Nigeria didn't comply fully with the requirements of the Paris principles, especially that guaranteeing the tenure of the CEO of the commission. What are the Paris principles?
The Paris Principles are a set of principles that were agreed at the beginning of the decade of the 1990s as to how countries could take steps to build up the standards of independence of national institutions for human rights with respect to the composition, tenure, the kinds of things the commissions are supposed to do and not do,
Yes.
the funding of such entities and stuff like that.
Yes.
And those principles are, I believe, about 21 years old at the moment.
Okay.
So that really is what it's about. And the amendment to the National Human Rights Commission Act last year tried to bring Nigeria and succeeded in bringing Nigeria. Sorry, it was 2011 actually. In February 2011, the president signed it into law. Brought Nigeria into compliance with the Paris Principles and made it possible for us to regain Category A certification. And since we regained that, I think our relationships with the international systems have grown from strength to strength.
Now, so can you still be fired at will?
My view of public office is that it's a revolving door. The day you go in, you're going out.
Yes.
And so, I don't take those things very seriously. They don't bother me, frankly. But under the Act, as it is, you have a removal procedure that is akin to an impeachment. The members of the council, other than by resignation, there's got to be a process that involves the legislature in order to get them removed.
Okay, so there's a process. Now, you also said that Nigerian youth shouldn't be neutral, especially when it comes to issues of national interest.
Oh, yes.
Neutral, why not? A lot of parents will tell their children, don't go and look for trouble.
Quite often trouble will find you. And neutrality, in my view, in a country like ours, is moral abdication of the wrongest kind. I can understand telling the kids you don't have to be partisan.
Yes.
Now, that's a choice. But we all have to be political. We all have to make a choice. And everything you do, I see a woman being beaten up by her boyfriend or her husband.
Yes.
And I say, it is not my business. Now, it is your business. Or, a young man bats a young woman in acid because the woman had the temerity to say no, and he returns to doing his work, and we're launching a fund, an appeal fund to reconstruct the woman. And the young man is there looking for the next man to bath in acid, and we say it is not our business. It is our business. Or, a public officer steals all the money that is supposed to fund hospitals and schools, and as a result, young women who get pregnant at the age of 18, 19, 20 die in childbirth. It is our business. And you see, it's easy for old people to say it is not their business. At the end of the day, they are past the age at which Nigerians should die. So if I tell a 15-year-old, don't do anything, while I am 70 years old, I'm failing the 15-year-old. because I've actually lived my life. The life expectancy in Nigeria is 46, 47. So when you're 70, you're on what's that borrowed time? Tell young people to do the things that will make them live up to 70 years old. And being neutral will not make you live up to 70 years old.
But being neutral doesn't necessarily mean joining a political party.
Joining a political party is lawful, and I think it's very desirable. I cannot join a political party as chairman of the National Human Rights Commission,
Yes.
but I encourage everybody to do so, because that is the place where the things that will change our country will happen, in the political parties. The people who have to take the decisions on hospitals, on schools, on roads, on seaports, on trade, safety and security, are all members of political parties. If you don't belong, you will not be part of the decision making.
Well, talking about the president's oath of office and those who say he could have relied on that alone to declare a state of emergency, the hoisting of a flag by Boko Haram, for example, couldn't that be considered to be a threat to Nigeria's sovereignty?
There are many ways in which sovereignty is threatened. And allegiance to an entity other than the sovereign entity of Nigeria could be a threat, depending on circumstances.
Yes.
You see, I do think the hoisting of a flag is part of a collection of acts that the president has interpreted in this way.
Yes.
Because, you know, too many people have flags, and you know, you have the flag of the House of Igbinedion, for instance. You know, but you know, you cannot possibly, or the crest of the House of Igbinedion.
Yes.
Now, you know, that's fun, but a lot of people will probably see that as an, you know, as an act of fantasy, not necessarily as a threat to the fantasy of self-aggrandizement, but not as a threat to the sovereign entity of Nigeria. So I think it's important to also see the wider context of acts. So it is a flag, it's a claim on territory, it is attempts, allegedly, to coerce the people who live in particular communities, attacks on security agencies, pushing them away from the place. So prisons have been attacked, police have been attacked and sacked, immigration attacked and sacked, customs sacked, armed forces attacked. So all of that, when you put all of that together, attacks on the security forces, pushing them back from their responsibilities, and then hoisting a flag from what will seem to be territories that have been claimed, that adds up to what the president, I believe, was talking about.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Prof, for coming back again and again on 60 Minutes with me.
No, thank you for having me. And one of these days, I'm sure we're going to have a conversation to celebrate something. That's my hope.
That's your hope. Well, you can like 60 Minutes with Angela on Facebook. Alternatively, you can follow me on Twitter, Angela at 60 Minutes. That's it for this week. Don't forget to keep a date with me. Same time, same day, same station. You never know who I'll be spending 60 Minutes with. I'm Angela Ajitumobi. I thank you for the pleasure of your company.